my dad spent his entire career in the RCMP in the north. So I moved around quite a bit when I was younger. Was born in the Yukon, grew up in the Northwest Territories. So we lived in Dawson City, Whitehorse, Iqaluit, Frobisher Bay at the time, and then Yellowknife. He retired from the RCMP then in '79, and then he went to work for mining company Caminco, which is now I think Teck Resources. So I grew up in a small mining town, about 1,500 people, called Pine Point, which is just south of Great Slave Lake, south of Yellowknife. Finished high school there, went to University of Calgary, did my political science degree, then moved back to Yellowknife. Was working for the legislature there for 5 years, I guess, and then Ottawa for 4 years, and then I had met Stuart in Yellowknife in 2000, and anyway, we started this diplomatic career, which I thought maybe was just going to be a couple of years in Bogota, Colombia, and as it turned out, we've been away 10 of the last 11 years in Colombia, London. Stuart was in Afghanistan for a year. I took a gap year and went traveling. Then we went back to Ottawa, and then we've been in Reykjavik, Iceland for the last 3.5 years. My dad grew up in a farm in Manitoba, just called Dauphin, just sort of north of Brandon. Finished high school, worked at Eaton's for a year, and then joined the RCMP, so did his training in Regina. And did his first posting in Surrey, BC, which he didn't like at all. It was the big city, I think, and was far away from the prairies, didn't really care for it, and volunteered to go up to Alexander Fjord for this 3-year stint in the middle of nowhere in the Arctic. He had never been north. So made this 3-year commitment and was there for 3 solid years, never getting out. Well, getting out, I guess, was going to Alert or Grise Fjord, and they went to also over in Greenland, Thule, Greenland, I think once or twice. So he was there with another RCMP, and then there were 2 special constables, both Inuit, and their families were there as well, and they had multiple children at the time. So he ended up spending time there, and then he moved around the north. He was posted in, strangely enough, in Pine Point when the mine sort of first opened in around 63, 64. Then was in Fort Smith, Fort Resolution, and then the other places that I was when I was born. So spent his entire career in the north. And anyway, these images were. They were originally, the reason for the Mounties being there was kind of a sovereignty exercise. They were, at the time, I guess, worried about a lot of the Greenland Inuit were coming over, mostly in the winter and the spring. They had built some turf houses there. And anyway, they were worried about the Danish flag being, poked in this tundra, and so as a sovereignty exercise, they had 2 RCMP and these special constables up there to basically tell them, you can stay and take out citizenship or go home. So that's what he did for 3 years. I think they had a fair bit of time on their hands, and so he took a lot of photos when he was there. But also has kind of established a relationship with the Inuit special constables and their families while they were there. So I'll just start going through some of these photos and see how far we get. And if you've got any questions, just let me know. Unfortunately, I was in a bit of a rush when I was putting these together. They're sort of clumped in a bit of an order, but they're a little bit scattered as well, not perfectly sequenced. I was, like I said, I was trying to get my dad's thoughts and get this done before his condition deteriorated too much, and so this is sort of what we have. So this settlement itself was very small. It was only a few buildings. He and the other RCMP had a house that they lived in. The 2 Inuit families had a house, and then there was sort of a shed, and then another storage area. They came up from I think it was from Montreal on the Labrador. Took the ship up and they would just get a shipment once a year in the summertime. All of their, well, there wasn't any fresh produce, all the frozen meat and canned goods and flour and all that stuff they would get in the summertime, and basically have to store it and live off that all year. So the ship would come up in the summertime, obviously, when there was no ice. And they'd unload all the supplies. So that was, so they had to get they were running off generators, so they have to get all their oil and basically everything they needed to survive for the year. So this is it. The two buildings where they lived, and then a couple of sheds. They did have a couple of boats that they could go out and obviously they just had dog teams and sleds in the wintertime to get around. In the summertime, the Inuit families would take some time off and just go and camp, basically in tents with their families, just to get a bit of time away from I think my dad and the other guy that was there, and live off the land a bit. And so that was that's the part of the two families that were there, just with their tent set up and doing a bit of summer camping on the land. This is part of the barge and just bringing in the supplies for the winter. And for some reason, they've got their red surges on. I think they must have. It was probably a photo op. I think of whoever was coming in on the ship wanted to have them in uniform for that. And then, the Labrador that came up, I think, had a couple of helicopters on it.
What kind of helicopter was that? Do you recall what your dad said that was?
Oh, no, I don't, actually.
Okay.
There's another close-up later on with people in it. You can see the name.
Yeah. This is just the breakup in the spring.
Brian, do you want to say where Alexander Fjord is on Ellesmere Island, just in case people don't know exactly?
It's in the middle. basic Greenland. I don't have a map to point it out specifically, but.
Sorry, would you like to interrupt? Is the sound okay at the back without the mic? Can you all hear? Yeah.
Okay.
Introduce the people.
My dad is on the left. I guess that would be the first picture you see of him. And then the other guy is just from the Labrador. This is the two special constables that were there when he was there. So they had a small boat like this to go out, and they got all of their meat and stuff at the one time of the year, and then there was this big sort of freezer that was dug into the ground. That's how they kept everything that they needed frozen for the year. And it was permafrost up there anyway, so it was, they didn't need electric freezers to do that. And they did a fair bit of hunting in the summertime because they needed food for the dogs. They didn't eat any of the local meat. The Inuit obviously did, but they had all their groceries and stuff that they needed. So they just needed meat in the wintertime to feed the dog teams and make sure they were kept alive. So that's you'll see some photos coming up of the hunts that they went on, mostly for walrus and seal. These are turf huts that I think but you can see two in this photo, one here and the one just up in front. I think there were about 2 or 3 of them that the Greenland Inuit would built and used when they came over to hunt. And it's interesting to see. That's another picture there. It's very similar to we're in Iceland right now, and you can see the same construction. They've got the Vikings have left some of these turf structures that they still exist, and it's fascinating to see the similarities between these and what's actually in Iceland right now. There's another photo. This is some of the landscape. These are the two Inuit special constables and the non-Aboriginal guys. I think Pete Sims. They didn't come and go at the same time. The RCMP officers, there's a bit of overlap, so. There were two different guys in the camp at the time my dad was there for his 3-year stint. Okay, yeah. So this is one of the senior RCMP who would obviously come up for a visit. So he's in full uniform. So I think my dad and Sims were in the red search for that visit. They didn't wear that very often, obviously. They probably only wore it once a year, I'm sure. So that's actually, that's Alexander Fjord. And there was a glacier that came down very close to where they were. They didn't have, they just got their water basically from the glacier and the runoff from that. There's you can see there's a serial number there. That's, I guess, they had sidewalks connecting the houses and painted a bunch of stones white, connecting them, which I'm not sure was that helpful in the wintertime, obviously, but I guess it looked pretty in the summer. And then they used, this was their radio frequency, so if a plane was flying over or something, they could be in contact with them, or get in communication with them if they wanted to.
Brian, the two houses, why were there two houses?
One was for my dad and the other guy that was there, and then the other house was for the Inuit family, which must have been rather cramped because they each had at least 4 kids, and so there was, probably at least a dozen people living in the other house.
Hey, so just when your father's coming in, I mean, there's lots of stories from the previous decades and other RCMP posts of RCMP officers who died at their posting, right? There's a graveyard on Devon Island, and one of his riflemen had discharged during a walrus hunt. There's dangers. Did your dad have any conception, really, of how isolated and, if something were to happen to him, it would be really hard for him to get evacuated? Did he all talk about that at all?
No, I don't think he really considered that. Because I had the same sort of, we were just going over these last week when I saw him again, and I knew there were families there and there were small kids, but I didn't realize how many babies were actually born there when he was there. And I said, well, how did that work? He said, well, the two wives just helped each other during their pregnancies, and he was always there during the pregnancy, not to help, but just, I don't know, in case. And I said, well, what if something happened? If there was a problem with the baby or the mother? And he's just like, well, they would have died because there was no way of getting them in or out or getting any help in if something went wrong. So.
Brian, wasn't there, I don't know if it's one of the pictures we'll see, but there was something about him having to learn some basic dentistry. It was like some RCMP manual because someone had an abscess tooth or something that had to be.
Yeah, and there's some shots here of him giving vaccinations to some of the kids as well. Just they would bring in some medicine in the summertime, and then they were basically responsible for giving the kids the vaccinations they need for the youth. Yeah.
This may sound stupid, but I'm amazed that these are in color.
Yeah, so was I.
And it's not, greeny. It's really good color.
Yeah.
It's not like, when you look back at old family photos, that kind of, was photography something that your father did before he went up, or he just kind of lucked into Was he processing the film when he was up there?
Yeah, I think so. They had a dark room set up in the limited space they had. I didn't really consider my dad much of a photographer at all growing up. And we've got some. That's the thing. I mean, this stuff has been in the trunk forever. We've got some family photos that he has slides of. That a large part of those I haven't actually seen. Although hopefully I'll get around to doing that now that I've started this project. But yeah, I was struck by the quality of the images when I first started looking at them. I mean, they've been in these old cartridges for years, and then sort of a few years ago he thought it would be easier if he started putting them into the old carousels. With the old projectors and stuff, and I was just like, oh my god, that's such a waste of time. Like, we need to have these digitized because then you can look on the TV and the computer, whatever. So thankfully, I was able to sort of steal the slides without him knowing them and just get them digitized thanks to Heather. So yeah, it's great to have them like this.
But he learned those skills.
Yeah, he learned them there because he didn't have them
from an RCMP man.
when he went up there. Like I said, he had a fair bit of time on his hands.
From YouTube videos.
Yeah, exactly.
Just look at the aerial in the previous shot. What kind of communication do you know with that facility? I assume it would just be amateur radio kind of thing, depending on the day, depending on what the atmosphere is doing.
Yeah, very much so. I think they were able to radio, some of the Julie and some of the closer spots and have a chat every once in a while.
It could do voice, not just Morse.
I'm sorry?
It could do voice, not just Morse code.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So they had, I think each RCMP member had their own dog team, and then each of the special constables had their own dog team. So there were a lot of dogs to feed, which necessitated a lot of hunting in the summer to get seal and walrus for them. This, I think, was just a tourist who flew in during the summer period, which didn't happen very often, I don't think. But I was also talking to my dad about, because they did hunt a lot of walrus, and I'm like, well, what did you do with all of the ivory, like all the tusks? You must have. He said one of the guys was a carver, and so he's got this cribbage board that's made out of an ivory tusk from a walrus. And I said, well, but you were hunting walrus all the time for dog food. I said, what did you do with all the rest? He said that they used to, people that would come in from either South Canada or whatever, they would just sort of, trade it for alcohol or whatever they needed, basically, or whatever they were short of, and sort of barter that way. Yeah, so that's a picture of the pathways connecting the buildings.
It's funny. I love what your dad said, because I was here sitting aside like that, and then he talked about whitewashing.
Yeah.
And I loved it, and I asked him why, and I loved it because he said this a lot. He said it was something to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Oh, sorry.
Just a quick question about the previous slide. You mentioned that visitors were obviously quite infrequent. I know at some of the stations further south, larger stations, they would actually host scientists coming up to do more than research. Was this station too small to facilitate that, even if they were bringing their own gear?
Yeah, there was no place for them to stay, and they had limited communication. And I think it just wasn't particularly easy to get in and out of. So, yeah, they spent a lot of time on their own. And that's just another shot from just after the lift, where they had all their supplies delivered. It just took them a while to sort everything through and find a place to store the stuff for the winter. This is one of the pictures from one of the hunts. They're just stopping to have tea and carve up what they need from the animal. Not quite sure if this is a seal or a walrus yet. I think it might be a walrus. But like I said, the Inuit were using a lot of the animal, either for their own consumption or for obviously for the dogs. There we go. So that they had the smaller boat that you already saw, and then this was the larger boat that they used to go on kind of longer excursions, although I think those were rather infrequent as well. They didn't do a lot of overnights on the boat, according to my dad. It was mostly used to help them with hunting.
And would he go out in the big boat to visit the special constables when they were camping on the land?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think they ventured very far actually when they were going to their summer camps. Oh, growing up, my dad always had this thing hanging in the garage or wherever, normally in the garage, and it was a walrus penis, which was rather large and long, and that was the one that was taken out of. Anyway, apparently they had to dry out, and the one that we had been drying out for most of my life, I think, in various parts places that we lived in. So that's what that is. Another picture of them hunting. And yeah, often they would just set up anchor, and then guys would try and find the best place to hunt and find the seals and get their binoculars and telescope out to see what was there, how to get on and off the boat. Oh, that's the picture of the glacier that comes down right close to the camp. You can see the houses on the right hand side there. They obviously had to cook for themselves, so I guess my dad learned to bake from his mom, and this was just some cakes and stuff that they were cooking.
Brian, do you know if he sported the early hipster look, like when he was there, or?
No, I don't think that. There's a picture, I think, in this batch that he was shaving off his beard, and I never knew him to have a beard growing up, so I don't think this lasted the entire 3 years that he was there. I didn't think my dad was much of a pet person growing up, but then now I end up seeing these photos of these puppies and the dogs in the house, which he grew up on a farm, and the dogs are never allowed pets are never allowed in the house, and then all of a sudden he's out there and the little puppies are running around and lying all over the place and on the couch, and I was like, really? There's a photo of the glacier again. Yeah. That's a picture from the hunt. At Christmas time, they always had the two Inuit families over for dinner. They had a drop at Christmas time where they would drop them a Christmas tree and a turkey and some mail, I think, and usually a little bit of alcohol that was well packaged that wouldn't get damaged on the drop, and then my dad was also saying that his mom, I think they got to talk to them occasionally, I think, over the radio, and so his mom would get the ages of the kids and the clothing sizes of the wives and stuff, and then send up clothes at Christmas time and gifts and games and stuff for the kids. So they would all get together and get dressed up and come over for Christmas dinner.
So how many kids in the bunch? So you're saying how many people all in one house?
Yeah, in this batch.
About 50?
Yeah, all in one house in the wintertime. I think that was my dad's dog, because they each had their own team, so they had a lead dog, which after 3 years when he left, he had to shoot because the dog wouldn't obey, and be able to lead the team with the new guy coming in. So it was definitely his dog. So unfortunately, when he left, the dog had to go. The Inuit that were there did some trapping in the wintertime. Partly so these are foxes that they would trap and collect the pelts, and then they would, I think they would sort of do up a shipment, and it would go down to Grease Fjord where there was a little co-op, and they would get some money just so that it would be able to have a bit of spending money. And there was a little store that my dad and the other guys sort of ran and could, if they needed to, sell them tobacco and some foodstuffs and that sort of thing.
But did your dad not say that they weren't supposed to hunt, but they did, or trade furs, but they also did?
Yeah, I think they did a little bit as well.
Brian,
Yeah.
what was the relationship with the special constables? Were they, because it sounds like the government or the RCMP was provisioning your dad and whoever was partnered there with him, but they weren't necessarily provisioning the special constables?
I think they were as well for some things, but probably not for...
But not for tobacco. And yeah. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. So this is, the kids, when they got the shipment at Christmas, my dad's mom and probably other guys as well would just send up some games and coloring books and different sorts of stuff. So this was all new and interesting for the kids.
Did you see, because I think it's really interesting, were these kids, they were just dressed up for Christmas? Did they normally dress in dresses and shirts like this, or did you see?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So this would be just the drop for that year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This wasn't Christmas dinner because they must have got 2 turkeys, maybe one for Christmas and one for New Year. So this was just the dinner for the 2 of them, not the big dinner that they were having with the other families. But they would bake pies and have.
Those pictures aren't related.
No, those aren't. So when they were out, they would come across different artifacts and stuff, and so a lot of the stuff they would collect and then try and document. Some of the stuff they just put back where it was. Other stuff, depending on the nature of it, I think some of the stuff got sent south down to Ottawa for collection, depending on what it was.
Would that be like Greenland Inuit, you think, or would that be a very old skeleton?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a police plane on skis that was able to come in the wintertime. And they just used the empty oil barrels to sort of make a little runway.
Brian?
Oh, sorry.
Just a question about the local store. I'm assuming that's probably not Alexander Fjord.
No.
But the previous one is, did they have to flatten out the ice strip at all, or was this thing just landing kind of helter-skelter on a fairly flat spot?
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
They didn't have any machinery
bulldozers
or equipment there to do that. I'm trying to remember the name of. Sorry.
Tule, isn't it?
No, there's another. There was another radar station. Eureka. Yeah, I think that's where this is taken. There's not that many aerial photos because they didn't get a chance to go up in a plane very often, but there are a few.
Brian, the one before, was that was an aerial photo of where? Is there community there on the side?
I'm not sure.
Maybe that's. It looks like it wouldn't have had that. That could be Thule.
Yeah, maybe. Or Eureka, possibly.
It looks a lot like Gansel Tower.
Dead Mountain? Yeah, it could be.
There's a few pictures here. This is in Grease Fjord. The guy's name was Bob Pilot. He was in the RCMP. My dad knew each other for quite some time. We were actually in Yellowknife together. And so this was the little trading store where a lot of the furs and stuff, the foxes would. They came there and then they got the Inuit got some money to either buy some stuff there or buy some tobacco and stuff back in Alexander Fjord.
Mounties, that would be an Inuit name, would it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they would run this.
I guess, but I for some reason I thought he said that it was the RCMP that actually, because it's strange that it has the NWT coat of arms on the outside.
Yeah.
Which makes me think it was government run. That's my dad, and they came across a herd of muskox. And I think they were probably frightened by definitely this little one was frightened by the plane when they landed and got separated from the rest of the herd. So he, so cute. That's one of my favorite photos. Anyway, they managed to get the little guy back into the rest of the herd and get it back to its mother. And then this was taken obviously at a different time in the summer, but I was trying to find out from my dad where this was actually taken because it's very green and there's a lot of shrubs and bush around. Yeah, I mean it's either in Greenland or it's just in a different southern part of Ellesmere Island because there's definitely not enough vegetation around that time.
Was there a lot of interaction with animals where your dad was staying? Like, did they come by a lot, or like did the muskox herds or groups?
I don't think they had muskox around them, but they definitely had polar bear and wolves
and so there was like
foxes.
regular interactions with them.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
They shot one of them. They shot one of them. The Inuit hunters did, because they can obviously use the hide and some of the other parts of the animal. This is back in Thule, I think, or in Eureka.
Wardair?
Yeah, Wardair
Telling me that's Wardair.
from Yellowknife.
Have you guys heard of Wardair? Who really knows? Who can explain this better than me? You can probably. Wardair. What was Wardair? It was a cheap no-frill, one of the first no-frill airlines, right?
It might have become that after, but it was
Yeah.
one of the small northern operators that.
They got merged into, was it in the Canada Pacific eventually?
Yeah, the late 50s. I think it got its real boost out of the building of the DEW line in the
Yeah,
mid-50s,
okay.
late 50s, and the resupply operation. So it was civilian contracted by the military, and obviously by RCMP for resupplying that too.
But I remember in the 70s and 80s as a kid flying to Yellowknife from Ottawa, and we would fly via Edmonton, and one of the options to fly north was Wardair, and they were 737s. So it was a competitive airline owned by one man, Max Ward.
Yeah.
And I think he sold the company to CP or CP Air.
Okay.
Is it a CF designation for the military versus
Again, as a bush pilot.
Okay.
He came in with her after my dad dropped out of bush pilot.
Yeah, this is a picture of them all out in their dog teams. They were trying to find a different way to get I'm not sure where they were going exactly, but to get around this rather large glacier. There were some photos, I don't actually think they're in this bunch about them actually trying to pull these sleds up with and get the dogs up this rather steep to get on top of it to get where they needed to go. Yeah, this is the picture that I described earlier, which showed giving the vaccinations to the kids.
That's neat. There's two kinds of harnesses in the Arctic, right? So this was the Yeah, the west.
Definitely.
No trees.
Yep.
There's just this harness and there's the
Yeah, there's a few trees. That's it.
That's the dogs just taking a break. They're out hunting right now. You can see on the right here. This is what they used to. It's just a white canvas basically with wood, so they would hide behind that so that the seals couldn't see them when they popped their heads up, and then shoot them. The dog's having a break, and the guy's having some tea, probably a cigarette. This shot is the Inuit hunters. I guess they had, a polar bear had come across, and they didn't see that it had any little ones. So the polar bear ended up getting shot. And then it was only after the fact they realized that there was a couple of cubs that was with it. This is in Eureka. That's one of the what do they call those things?
Barbecues.
Yes.
Early skidoos.
So it's basically got the tracks in the back, and then there's two skis on the front to steer. Dad said a lot of times when they were somewhere with the dog teams and there was planes and stuff like that, they'd sort of have to line up the dog teams in a certain way in front of the plane so the pilots want the picture taken with the plane in the background and the dog team and everything. So it's a bit of a process. I don't think my dad was much of a sewer, but I think Sims did some sewing. They had a singer up there, and that's the radio equipment in the background that they use for all their communications. That's laundry day.
Would it dry?
Yes.
Crispy.
If it froze, they could beat it with a stick. Get the ice out of the grill.
It was still dry out on those fronts, so you stand up on the stove so you can soften it up enough to get into it more.
This was just they had a bit of a workshop where they could do some work on the sleds because they had different tracks for different times of the year. This is another police plane on skis.
You're talking saying when they went to Thule, the RCMP would come with the RCMP plane and fly them to Thule rather than go across. I think he said he never went across or around on land.
No. This was a visit by some senior RCMP, so they were all in uniform. Oh yeah, this is one of the. This is a photo of the Greenland Inuit dress very differently than the Inuit in the north of Canada. So they would come over from Greenland dress very well. The pants they're wearing are polar bear skin, and then the jackets are caribou.
And then they would dye the colors, I guess. How would they get the colors on would they buy that? I guess they would buy that from the fabric to make the colors.
Oh, sorry. These ones are the Inuit, the Canadian Inuit from Alexander. So it's just these ones here, yeah, and all decked out in fur.
But whether would the Canadian Inuit get their?
I think the women made them. I thought maybe that they were sort of RCMP issue, but I know that. But yeah, the women made the coats for their husbands and for dad. The men from Greenland, their polar bear pants are skin, fur out. Whereas there's another picture coming up where there's a woman from Greenland, and she's got the more traditional fur on the inside. And the skin on the outside, which is for colder temperature. Yes, that's another photo of the Greenland Inuit and their dog teams when they would come over. This was this was probably part of the Christmas drop, I think, where they would get their tree and some food and then something to drink over the holidays. That's just the dog teams taking a rest. When they were trying to get around this big glacier. That's one of the few pictures actually they've got with an igloo in it. I'm just don't think they traveled that much. They're that far in the wintertime, so they.
There were, what did you say? Once or twice a year, they would do a longer trip.
Yeah.
Overland to Greece, or even as far as Resolute, I thought.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. When the time I talked to your daddy, he was talking about even the special constables might go off for like 10 days at a time to buy dog sled.
Yeah.
To get, yeah.
And they're quite social when the Greenlanders would come over. It's not like they were told to go make camp somewhere else. They were invited in and would have tea and something to eat and socialize. The vaccinations continue. This is one of the boats just doing some maintenance and repairs.
So they did that themselves too?
Yeah.
Everything, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
This is obviously springtime because they're dressed rather. Oh, and then this is not my dad. This is Symons. Thought it was quite warm out. Apparently, he was quite sick after it got quite cold. A couple days after this photo was taken. And they have to stop for a bite to eat and some tea. Setting up camp. That's a photo from the poster.
Were they looking for walrus there, do you think?
Yeah, I think they were looking for
And interesting.
seal or walrus.
Your dad said that the Inuit preferred using the telescope rather than binoculars that the RCMP had. That the RCMP didn't bring the telescopes, the Inuit had them.
And then, yeah, you can see the camp just behind down there.
It's really, really interesting when you were looking at them maybe hunting for walrus, just to underscore that we're talking to your dad, the amount of time, and you mentioned it, invested in the dogs, like hunting for, like it was like the dogs ruled, right? There were 40 dogs and a couple of 15 people, and everything, because that's their own that's their only technology in the winter. Everything revolves around keeping the dogs happy.
Yeah.
And you can see all this. Yeah, it's all for the dogs, right? Yeah.
That one before, Brian, was where they're packing up the boat. That's to go off to their summer camp.
Yeah, I think so. They were just setting up. There's still a lot of snow, but I guess not so much on land. It was mostly the water, the ice. But yeah, that was taking them out to their summer camp. That was clearly their boat, not the RCMP boat, so they had their own. That's the little store where they would come for supplies, sugar, flour, and all the basics, and tobacco. And they obviously rolled their own cigarettes at that time, so they had their papers. And they had a bit of clothes too, I think, some of the basics. These, I think, are big whale bones.
It's a whale boat, right?
Yeah. That's them at their summer camp. This is the fresh water they would get from the glacier. I think that's another shot of the Labrador, just from a different angle. The summer.
Is that American guy there?
I think on the right, yeah, these are both. Oh, sorry. Yeah, on the ends, those are Americans, so they must have come in on the ship, and that's why they're dressed up, I guess.
Yeah. So there were a lot, right, of Americans coming and going, and tourists, Americans, Greenlanders, RCMP, military, yeah.
I mean, I think they look forward to the summer, obviously, for many reasons, the warmth and the sun, but also I think they've just got a lot more visitors. Sorry, question?
Through a lot of the pictures, the officers are doing a lot of things together with the community. So I was just curious as to what the language barrier was and how do they communicate when they're going on a hunt together or when they're trying to get things done together. How do they communicate with each other?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a struggle because my dad, I think, during that time learned to speak a little bit of Inuktitut when he was there. And these, the special constables were posted in, I think both of them came from Bata Island, maybe. I'm not exactly sure which communities they came from. And so they would have had a bit of English, obviously dealing with the RCMP from their jobs there. But I'm not sure their family members, their wives and their kids spoke any English at all. So yeah, I think the communication was a bit of a challenge at times for them. He's definitely American.
They're definitely American.
They're definitely American.
Oh, that's that little boat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
They had to anchor it out and then be careful of the ice.
It's a neat little boat. Do you want to just go back for a second?
Sure.
Again? But doesn't the bow drop down? Yeah, the little cargo boats.
Yeah, the little barge to
beautiful.
transport
Yeah.
people and stuff from the ship. That's the Labrador again.
So I think that one that you showed before that had the number at the front, I think that was the American
Okay.
ship.
All right. And then they this was just they're taking one of the special constable's wife and the kids out to the ship just for fun. A little excursion for them to get off the land and get up in the air. And just little pups. So they would obviously harvest all the seals. This is walrus here, and then load it all into the boat, and then have to unload it when they get back to the camp, and then store it for the winter for the dogs. Let's show the walrus. My dad said he did a lot of reading, and I can sort of see that now because he reads a lot now that he's older, and obviously he spent a lot of time. He said the other day that there was this woman from this American woman that used to send up books and stuff like that for them to read.
Yeah, she did throughout the. Oh my gosh, yeah.
I can't remember what her connection was to the place.
To the people serving in the isolated station.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Can you give us a sense of how much material he had available to read?
Oh, I don't think there was that much. You don't see any pictures of like bookshelves full of books and a whole library or anything. So. Oh yes, that was obviously his dog, lead of his team.
Brian,
Yeah.
sorry, just back at that photo again. I noticed some of the, well, I know it's not all chronological, but in some shots he has obviously government issued shoes on, and I'm assuming those are not government issued.
Yeah,
so,
those were made.
So would the wives have made those for them?
Yeah.
And they, I guess, basically found that they were better quality than what they've been issued?
Yeah, more comfortable. Oh yeah, so that's another. These are the things that they hide behind when they're hunting seal and walrus. Here's a don't know how many, there's probably at least a dozen or 15 seals that they've got.
Once they get, because you were saying that they just pop their heads out of the water and they shoot them behind a wave. How do they actually get them out of the water? Like open size of the walrus, that must only float for a bit.
Yeah, I think they had to be quick
It's like,
to get over there. And then,
Do they have, that would be harpoons with have boys, but not.
yeah, then, I mean, Dad's got one at home. He's got a long harpoon with a long string on it, so then they can just go over and attach that and then drag them out of the hole.
I was assuming they would stray far from the group of dogs to hunt because dogs can't really be around.
Yeah.
They have the long part of it.
Leave them a little bit of a distance so that they could.
Except that the dogs would sometimes help to sniff out the seal holes, so they were useful to have in noses. And then, as you said, interesting between a walrus, which obviously weighs a lot, one person, even one really strong man. There's a few stories of sort of superhuman, legendary, Inuit who could haul them out. But for the most part, with a seal, you could take out as an individual depending on the type of seal. A walrus is definitely a team effort, so having to collaborate is pretty key.
So how often did they go on hunts, and how long would like that haul of 15-ish seals hold them over?
I'm not sure.
I think it's not a hold them over, it's a provisioning for the winter,
Yeah.
and they probably would need multiple
Yeah.
excursions of that.
Seals seems
You've got
like a
40
lot.
dogs eating,
Oh, yeah.
40 dogs can eat 15
Yeah.
seals.
So it'd be
a couple
multiple
of
trips
days.
probably to build
Yeah.
the stockpile.
Yeah, all the time, I guess.
It's just a camp.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
Brian?
Yeah, this was
I think it's Cane Basin.
Cane Basin detachment. It's like this little shack, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. That was I'm not sure how far it was from.
It was one day. It was the first night when they would
Yeah,
land.
they could stop there if
They'd stop and sleep there.
They sleep there if they needed to.
So it wasn't manned, I'm assuming.
No.
Cane Basin is north, right? That would be towards the murder, right?
Yeah. This was a great. We were trying to read the writing, but it's kind of in this weird font. It was hard to decipher what was actually on the cross.
I have a feeling it's Norse or Nordic name because the first letters of the second name look like Sven, S-V-E-R, and I just can't read the rest.
So near Cane Basin, it could be an American too, the Norwegian name.
Yeah, probably American.
Probably, we'll just, whenever you feel like, because we'll field some more questions and then,
Okay.
but not, we're 1:30, why don't we just finish? Just go through something. We're almost. That picture of the tundra, that was what we were talking about last week with is those eggs?
Yeah, there's a couple
And just remarkable fluorescence once it weather gets warm.
There's only been another 30 photos that I've got here, so we can. A lot of them are just shots like this with them out hunting in boats while they could in the summertime. Very short summer that they had. These are a couple. My dad said these are the old camps, sort of rock houses that the Inuit had made in the summertime.
The Greenland.
Yeah, the Greenland. Skull. It's another walrus hunt. The bird. That's sort of at the bottom of the glacier in the summertime. There's a lot quite green.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's really green. Oh, goodness.
That's a bit of a picture of the glacier. Christmas.
polar bear on the wall.
Oh, man.
All right. Oh yeah. So he ended up getting 5 polar bear hides while he was up there. I think mostly just to he kept one for himself, and then he gave one each to his brothers and his sister, and then I think he sold one to a friend. So he's got one at home. And then we actually have one in Iceland. His sister passed away a few years ago, and her husband didn't want it, and their kids didn't want it. So I was like, well, it's no point being a box in storage somewhere. And so I asked if I could buy it off him. So he gave it to me. So now I've got.
Do they last well? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Do they?
Oh, these are actually wolves.
No, but I mean the polar bear.
But the polar bear itself, yeah. I mean, it's. I suppose it's a little bit. Well, they're never as perfectly white as you think they are. But
Beautiful. The lights.
and then I was saying earlier that in 1,400 of these pictures that he took, there's probably only 3 pictures of sunsets. And I was just like, I said, why wouldn't you take more? I mean, the sunsets in the Arctic and in the North are spectacular. He says, well, once you've seen one, what's the big deal? And I'm just like, really? You got all this time in your hand?
That photo before, the colorful one, I think it's fascinating to think that that's taken without any filters of any kind.
Yeah.
That's just the color it was. These days you can do that on Instagram in about 5 seconds, but it's
At the time, to exposure.
That's another Christmas.
What's fascinating with the polar bears is that the mountains weren't given a ton of training about what wildlife was like up there when there were sens up there. So I can only imagine what your dad would have been like to see his first polar bear. And
Yeah.
I mean, even are scared of polar bears. These are ferocious bears, and that would have been a really neat encounter.
This is another photo of the Greenland Inuit who would come over. So this is one of the women that Stuart was talking about earlier. Just with here the polar bear is the fur's on the outside, whereas on the women they have the fur on the inside.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think of, you always hear that the Greenlandic Inuit had better education than the Canadian Inuit, and they were more. Not more integrated, but more sort of brought into, sort of the society, in a sense that they were more sort of progressive, you're taught to believe. Yet, it's interesting that the Canadian Inuit, from what we've seen, are the ones that are actually dressed more in materials that would have been, bought at the store or Hudson's Bay Company, and these guys look like they're just still dressing right from the land. Right?
I think there's real differences between the north and south and east and west of Greenland. We had, I don't know if you've seen a Canadian film called Vanishing Point. It was done a couple of years ago. We presented it at Arctic Circle actually a few years ago and at the Peterborough Film Festival by Canadians who trace the heritage connection between what they call polar Eskimos actually, which are in the north of Greenland, which would be these ones that come from around Thule in Greenland, because they were dying out about 100 years ago, and following visions of a shaman, an Inuit hunting party left from southern Baffin and went to the north and discovered these people and helped repopulate them over a generation, and then brought back a lot of DNA, but different sort of customs and traditions, and some things they do more in traditional ways, and some things the Canadian Inuit do. It's interesting to see that, but I know what you mean, Heather, when you see community pictures of the south of Greenland, around Nuuk and the communities in the south, it looks almost like a Danish fishing village.
Once you get past the Umanok and Disco Bay, it's very traditional. Even today, it's there's stark differences.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting too when you look at the Inuk on the far left, Greenlandic Inuk woman, when she takes off her exterior clothing. She's wearing what does seem to be definitely Western garb.
Yeah.
We bought a store in Greenland. It was very Scandinavian.
Yeah.
So I also think too, it's when you're traveling on the land and you're going out, just like the RCMP constables are doing, right? They're adopting the dress that's best suited to the condition, which is going to be the traditional dress of Inuit. But then when you're getting out and you see the classic sort of Western Arctic Mother Hubbard, who's wearing pink there, I mean, that would be for around home, sort of your fancy Sunday wear. So it's quite interesting where I'm not sure, that's what I love about these, there's different ways of reading them and interpreting them and thinking about them. But again, for coming over from Greenland, it may be entirely progressive and fitting to say, of course, we understand the Western culture, we interact in Thule, but by God, when you're traveling long distances, you'd be silly to wear anything other than polar bear skins and
Yeah. So it's all in context. Yeah. Oh, cool.
These are all the Greenland Inuit.
Oh, so yeah. So this is under the polar bear jackets.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sweater is clearly
Yeah.
fisherman's sweater
Yeah.
from whalers or from.
It's so they did some, as I mentioned earlier, they did some trapping of fox and stuff. So this, they were just going to collect what was in the traps and bring them home, thaw them out, skin them.
Now, with white foxes that were really the big deal, if you look, even today at the Arctic Council logo, it's a white fox, right? It's just the iconic species. Besides polar bear.
This is just a couple shots out in the boat. Another one of the turf huts that you've already seen. It's just unloading on the plane. Oh, and the last photo is one of a narwhal. So one of the special constables that was up there, they had I don't think narwhals were that common. I don't think they hunted that many of them. But my dad does have a full narwhal tusk at home, and then he's sort of got a half of one, and then attached a bone on as a handle. It's like a walking cane almost. That's been carved around the handle stuff. That's really quite nice.
We have it.
Yeah. So that's it. The Grease Fjord, and they went to also over in Greenland, Thule, Greenland. I think once or twice. So he was there with another RCMP, and then there were two special constables, both Inuit, and their families were there as well, and they had multiple children at the time. So he ended up spending time there, and then he moved around the north. He was posted in, strangely enough, in Pine Point when the mine sort of first opened in around 63, 64. Then was in Fort Smith, Fort Resolution, and then the other places that I was when I was born. So spent his entire career in the north. And anyway, these images were. They were originally, the reason for the Mounties being there was kind of a sovereignty exercise. They were, at the time, I guess, worried about a lot of the Greenland Inuit were coming over, mostly in the winter and the spring. They had built some turf houses there. And anyway, they were worried about the Danish flag being, poked in this tundra, and so as a sovereignty exercise, they had two RCMP and these special constables up there to basically tell them, you can stay and take out citizenship or go home. So that's what he did for 3 years. I think they had a fair bit of time on their hands, and so he took a lot of photos when he was there. But also has kind of established a relationship with the Inuit special constables and their families while they were there. So I'll just start going through some of these photos and see how far we get. And if you've got any questions, just let me know. Unfortunately, I was in a bit of a rush when I was putting these together. They're sort of clumped in a bit of an order, but they're a little bit scattered as well, not perfectly sequenced. I was, like I said, I was trying to get my dad's thought on the land. This is part of the barge and just bringing in the supplies for the winter. And for some reason, they've got their red surges on. I think they must have. Yeah, it was probably a photo op, I think, of whoever was coming in on the ship wanted to have them in uniform for that. And then, yeah, the lab that came up, I think, had a couple of helicopters on it.
What kind of helicopter was that? Do you recall what your dad said that was?
Oh, no, I don't, actually.
Okay.
There's another close-up later on with people in it. You can see it.
Yeah. This is just the break camp in the spring.
Brian, do you want to say where Alexander Fjord is on Ellesmere Island, just in case people don't know exactly?
I was in the middle. basic Greenland. I don't have a map to point it out specifically, but.
Sorry, do you like to interrupt? Is the sound okay at the back without the mic? Can you all hear? Yeah.
Okay.
Introduce the people.
My dad is on the left. I guess that would be the first picture you see of him. And then the other guy is just from the Labrador. This is the two special constables that were there when he was there. So they had a small boat like this to go out, and they got all of their meat and stuff at the one time of the year, and then there was this big sort of freezer that was dug into the ground. That's how they kept everything that they needed frozen for the year, and it was permafrost up there anyway, so it was, they didn't need electric freezers to do that. And they did a fair bit of hunting in the summertime because they needed food for the dogs. They didn't eat any of the local meat. The Inuit obviously did, but they had all their groceries and stuff that they needed. So they just needed meat in the wintertime to feed the dog teams and make sure they were kept alive. So that's you'll see some photos coming up of the hunts that they went on, mostly for walrus and seal. These are turf huts that I think but you can see two in this photo, one here and the one just up in front. I think there were about 2 or 3 of them that the Greenland Inuit would built and used when they came over to hunt. And that's another picture there. It's very similar to we're in Iceland right now, and you can see the same construction. They've got the Vikings have left some of these turf structures that they still exist, and it's fascinating to see the similarities between these and what's actually in Iceland right now. There's another photo. This is some of the landscape. These are the 2 Inuit special constables, and the non-Aboriginal guys. Is I think Pete Sims. They didn't come and go at the same time. The RCMP officers, there's a bit of overlap, so. There were 2 different guys in the camp at the time my dad was there for his 3-year stint. Okay, yeah. So this is one of the senior RCMP who would obviously come up for a visit. So he's in full uniform. So I think my dad and Sims were in the red surge for that visit, and get this done before his condition deteriorated too much. And so this is sort of what we have. So this settlement itself was very small. It was only a few buildings He and the other RCMP had a house that they lived in. The two Inuit families had a house, and then there was sort of a shed, and then another storage area. They came up from I think it was from Montreal on the Labrador. Took the ship up, and they would just get a shipment once a year in the summertime. All of their, well, there wasn't any fresh produce, all their frozen meat and canned goods and flour and all that stuff they would get in the summertime, and basically have to store it and live off that all year. So the ship would come up in the summertime, obviously, when there was no ice. And they'd unload all the supplies. So they had to get they were running off generators, so they have to get all their oil and basically everything they needed to survive for the year. So this is it. The two buildings where they lived, and then a couple of sheds. They did have a couple of boats that they could go out and obviously they just had dog teams and sleds in the wintertime to get around. In the summertime, the Inuit families would take some time off and just go and camp, basically in tents with their families, just to get a bit of time away from I think my dad and the other guy that was there, and live off the land a bit. And so that was that's the part of the two families that were there, just with their tent set up and doing a bit of summer camping. My dad spent his entire career in the RCMP in the north. So I moved around quite a bit when I was younger. Was born in the Yukon, grew up in the Northwest Territories. So we lived in Dawson City, Whitehorse, Iqaluit, Frobisher Bay at the time, and then Yellowknife. He retired from the RCMP then in '79, and then he went to work for mining company Caminco, which is now I think Teck Resources. So I grew up in a small mining town, about 1,500 people, called Pine Point, which is just south of Great Slave Lake, south of Yellowknife. Finished high school there, went to University of Calgary, did my political science degree, then moved back to Yellowknife. Was working for the legislature there for 5 years, I guess, and then Ottawa for 4 years, and then I had met Stuart in Yellowknife in 2000, and anyway, we started this diplomatic career, which I thought maybe was just going to be a couple of years in Bogota, Colombia, and as it turned out, we've been away 10 of the last 11 years in Colombia, London. Stuart was in Afghanistan for a year. I took a gap year and went traveling. Then we went back to Ottawa, and then we've been in Reykjavik, Iceland for the last 3.5 years. My dad grew up on a farm in Manitoba, just called Dauphin, just sort of north of Brandon. Finished high school, worked at Eaton's for a year, and then joined the RCMP, so did his training in Regina. And did his first posting in Surrey, BC, which he didn't like at all. It was the big city, I think, and was far away from the prairies, didn't really care for it, and volunteered to go up to Alexander Fjord for this 3-year stint in the middle of nowhere in the Arctic. He had never been north. So made this 3-year commitment and was there for 3 solid years, never getting out. Well, getting out, I guess, was going to alert or